Your UI designer can hardly contain themselves. They've just designed the slickest dark mode UI of their career, and they can't wait to get it into production. On the other hand, you're a UI developer. You know that dark mode can be one of those things that's hard to get right. But luckily, you've done some reading. There's actually a well-practiced way of doing themed colors in Fusion, and you assume it should keep things under control. So you open up your text editor and you do this. You create a module script and you call it theme. Inside, there's a table of named themes. Each named theme stores a bunch of colors with different names. You're going to want to select these colors dynamically, so you create a value object storing the current theme you're using. Light if you're using light mode, or dark if you're using dark mode. Then you create a new table, and inside of it, you associate every named color with a computed that selects the color from one of the named themes, based on that value object. You're done now. All that's left is for all of your UI code to start using those computed theme colors. It's a clean, simple solution that's often all you need. You recline in your ergonomic throne. That was painless. Some time passes. As a weekend project, you're working on implementing some Horsecat stories, so you can preview your UI in a window while you're working. You decide that it would be quite nice to see what the dark theme and the light theme look like side by side. So you try and instantiate a pair of components, but then you realize. Okay, let's dig into that intro example. The problem that you just ran into is that there's only one theme module, and inside that module you can only have one theme active at a time. There's nothing you can do to change that. You can't isolate a specific bit of code to use a different theme, you can't overwrite theme colors for testing, nothing. Back when you wrote that code, you hard-coded everything. Every single part of your codebase is inseparably bound to this one specific table of colors. So the idea of having the dark theme and the light theme on the same screen for testing, it's nonsense. Now, it's not hopeless. There's actually an idiomatic way of solving this problem, and it's quite simple. Instead of hard-coding the theme module into every component, instead you accept the table of theme colors as a property. Instead of reading from a hard-coded global variable, you're now reading from whatever location you're told to. In theory, this is perfect. The user of your component has full control over what it will look like, but unfortunately in practice, it's just a burden. Imagine you have a button that depends on the theme colors, but it's inside of a bunch of other components that have no reason to care about the theme. Perhaps they're components that just store state and manage other things, rather than presenting anything visual. If we were to use the global theme module, then there's no problem. However, if we were to make it a property, then all of those non-visual components suddenly have to provide a theme property that they don't have knowledge about. It's true, they could just require the global theme module, but you end up with the same problem as doing that inside the button. You hard-code that connection and you lose the flexibility. So unfortunately, you're forced to add a theme property to those in-between non-visual components, too. I don't have to explain why this is bad for maintainability. If you make a small change to that button, you might have to fix 50 other files that have nothing to do with buttons. This problem is so pervasive throughout all sorts of UI development that it has a name. Prop drilling. Named as such because you have to drill a property down through all of your components. So, how do we solve this theming conundrum? It's clear that we don't want to prop drill, but it's also clear that we need to pass in the theme dynamically somehow. Something you might try is changing that global variable over time, to point to whatever theme you want new UI components to use. When you construct these UI components, they'll grab whatever values in that global variable, and they'll use that as their theme. This lets you pass in different themes without passing in a property. Just change the global variable to whatever you need, create the component, and then change the value back, so you don't step on anyone else's toes if they were doing something. What you've just created is this sort of middle ground value. It's not exactly global because it depends on where you are in the program, but it's not exactly local either because it's obviously not just confined to the component. In some sense, the value is contextual. It's transparently drawn in from the nearby surroundings, like a hidden property. Contextual values are really useful whenever you're dealing with these pervasive things that get piped into huge parts of your codebase. That's why in Fusion 0.3 we're adding first-class support for contextual values. They're pretty similar to what I explained previously. You create a contextual value with the contextual constructor. It asks you to provide a default value, so it will always have something to give you. At any time, you can call the now method, which tells you what the value of the contextual is at this specific moment in time. Finally, to give the contextual a value, you can say that it is a value during a callback. The contextual changes to that value, then it runs the callback, then it changes back to whatever it was previously. Under the hood, it's almost exactly like that, so it's really fast, but it also takes some extra care and handles coroutines and errors correctly for you, so you can safely use this code wherever you want to. This all makes it super easy to share a slightly different value with just a few things, then continue on as normal. So, where does that leave us with our intro example? Well, seeing the mess that you've gotten yourself into, you think back to this very video, and you remember all of this stuff about contextual values. So you create a contextual inside that global theme module, which by default is just that table of computed colors. Then all of your components grab the current theme when they're first constructed, using the now method. Importantly, this is done once at the start of the component, not inside of any events or deferred code, because remember, this is timing based. From there, your components can just index into the theme colors you get from that now method, and it's pretty much business as usual after that. Running your code, you see that everything works just like before. All your UI still reacts to dark theme like you want it to. However, now you can return back to your horse cat story, and at long last, you can override the theme for each button. You wrap each button in a function call, and you tell the contextual to run each of them. The first button is given the light theme, and the second button is given the dark theme. Just like that, you can finally see the light theme and the dark theme side by side. So, that's contextual values. If you'd like to experiment with an early implementation of them, it's live on Fusion's development branch today. You can check it out over on the usual links. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Anyway, I've been Dan, and I'll see you all next time. Have fun!